Welcome to a Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and today I have a special guest with me, Jeanette Robért. Thanks for being here, especially all the way from Dallas.
Wow, all the way from Dallas.
Yeah, we didn't have to do a Zoom call.
No, this is
great.
great.
I've had to Zoom with my friends in Austin.
Oh, okay.
And yet you flew all the way down here.
Yes.
That's super special. I feel honored to have you.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about Jeanette. We
Yeah.
normally like to dive in pretty quick, but give us a little of your backstory.
Yeah. So I originated from Rhode Island, the smallest state
Really?
in the Union, and mostly grew up on the West Coast, though, in Oregon. And then from that journey, I just lived a lot of places across the United States. I've been in Texas now, though, for 12 years in Texas, in North Texas.
What brought you to Texas?
Yeah. Wild story.
Okay.
So back up. You're all the way back. I was actually, before Texas, I was living in the state of Wisconsin. My grandparents had retired up there years ago, and I never lived around them. And so I decided I was via New Mexico. I would move up there after being in New Mexico. And so I moved to Wisconsin and served them for a few years, got to know them, really love on them. But Wisconsin's a different place. It's a great place, but it gets cold. And I was in Madison, and there's this isthmus, which is basically a road that goes across two lakes, and it freezes, and you can go ice fishing, so it was a different environment for me. But my brother and his wife had moved to Dallas, and they said, come visit. I'm like, Texas, I don't know. Come visit. And when you're supposed to be somewhere. Ended up moving, told Grandma and Grandpa, love you guys, but I think the next step is to move to Texas. And so I ended up moving to Texas from Wisconsin.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And did you have a job lined up, or?
So it was a little bit by faith, one of those things where you're like, okay, I think I'm supposed to do this. I was in commercial lending, so I was working for a bank up in Wisconsin, and I actually put the feelers out. I did have an offer. It was for a company that purchased other companies, and so an opportunity to get kind of in the ground level with them. But I ended up not working for them. I ended up just moving here, even though I did have a job offer, but I moved here. So that was a blessing to have an offer, but yeah.
It's enough of a carrot to get you to make the leap, huh?
Exactly, yeah.
So what do you do now?
So a big part of my world right now is I work for a nonprofit. So I work for an organization based in North Texas that provides proactive employee care to employees and their families in the marketplace through what we call chaplain care teams. And so I get the opportunity to tell the story and share with other business leaders and executives about that opportunity to layer in a benefit to their employees.
So you're regularly in all types and sizes of companies?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing out in the marketplace as you're out there talking to big, little? Are there any themes you're seeing, especially from the employee care side of things? You have any concerns? You see anything positive?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things that I see as I engage in conversations is a lot of, especially leaders, are saying, I'm at capacity. I want to be able to help people through what they're walking through, but I have stuff in my own life and I need resources. And so I feel as though there's this common theme in the marketplace and different people that I get a chance to engage with, that there is I think I know what to do, but I need extra help. I need support. And so that's some things that I hear quite often.
So the leaders themselves are starting to admit, I personally am at capacity.
Right. Yeah.
Which is rare. I mean, I say that's rare because I went into the corporate world in the late 80s, early 90s. You never admitted you were at capacity.
Of course
you just
not.
worked more hours.
Yes.
Right? 100-hour weeks, climb the corporate ladder. That's what you got to do. So do you think it's healthy that people are admitting that the leaders are opening up, that they're at capacity?
I think there is a level of, when you're talking about back in the 80s where you didn't really acknowledge, but there is this level of transparency to say it's okay to not be okay, because I, as a leader myself, am having to reach out for help, recognizing that as I'm reaching out for help, it's okay for another to know that I am a human being who struggles as well and needs support. So I do think that there is more of an openness to be real And of course, there's still that stigma, but there is more of an openness of realness because people are relating with each other and they're wanting to connect. And so there just feels like there's this, I feel better because now someone gets me or we're on the same page.
I saw an article the other day talking about the ongoing mental health crisis, and it's actually worse than we realize. And more people are admitting they're struggling with issues during the work hours. Their thoughts
Yeah.
are on those issues.
Yeah.
And are you seeing that?
I believe so. I think I can probably share all kinds of statistics, but it's a fact that a lot of people are paying more attention to what does mental health really mean and how do I handle my own mental health and be self-aware of my triggers or an area that I need to work on. I think about the book, I read it a while ago, The Emotionally Healthy Leader by Peter Scazio. And what's in that book, he talks about, he's very vulnerable and real about his journey of recognizing his own emotional health, how it was unhealthy as a leader, and therefore it caused toxicity in his organization. But it was a blind spot. And then once he went through some hard times himself, recognized, whoa, I got to work on me. And it feels as though there is a lot of individuals, whether they're in leadership or whether they're whatever they're doing, whatever their responsibility is in the workforce or even in families, saying, I need to work on me. And how do I do that? And that's not easy to do because sometimes when we stop and we look inside, we're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But how healthy it is, especially if we're going to be leading another.
Mm-hmm. Are the leaders you're talking to, are they going for professional help? They just doing some self-awareness exercises, combination thereof?
I think it runs the gamut. You know, there's a lot of hot topic words out there in the workforce right now talking about how do I have mental health first aid and can I get trained? And there's just so many things out there, these buzzwords, because people are there is this, I want to be proactive, but I feel I'm reactive right now because I haven't been proactive. And so how do I get to a proactive state for myself and for others?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it is definitely, there is quite movement happening, as I'm sure that you've run across as well.
Mm-hmm. Is it, are you encouraged by what you're seeing, or you still think we got a long ways to go? Where are we at in that continuum?
I am encouraged, number one, like I was sharing this vulnerability, that there is a health in being real and recognizing that the stigma maybe of specifically we're talking about mental health or recognizing, wow, I need support or help outside of me. That's healthy, very, very healthy. There are so many avenues that one could take. And from my perspective, I really believe that there is really a lot of different avenues can help and support, but do we want to put a Band-Aid on or do we want to get to the root? And when we talk about getting to the root of an issue in our lives, I believe we need a higher power. And so in that midst of all of that, there could be some people that get disappointed in thinking that they're fixing something and actually not really getting to the root of what's really happening.
I know you mentioned the stigma earlier. So I think I technically am a Gen Xer, right? So my parents, baby boomers, or the end of the baby boomers, and I'm the beginning of the next gen. Certainly growing up in the South, conservative household, traditional, it was mental health is a thing you don't talk about, right? And so for when Christina and I decided to go to a marriage seminar, didn't really talk too much about that, right? Mm-hmm. Felt really stupid afterwards because, well, we should have done that a lot sooner.
Right.
But then several years after that, we decided to go see a counselor together and separately for a short season because we felt like there was more to process. Like this was the marriage retreats have been awesome, and God really used those to move us along the path to health. But like there's a few things we feel like maybe we could go deeper, we could go further. And so I remember I was like, wow. Don't want this to get out on the grapevine and my kids hear about it or a couple of my key people in my life. So I reached out to a couple of guys that and said, "Hey, just so you don't hear this on the grapevine, Christina and I have decided to go see a counselor for just to go better, further. No real major issues, just feel like we've stalled, and
Mhm.
we like the way this was going.
Mhm.
The health that was being achieved. So we so I send that text, and one of them replies with something that really blessed me. Was he said, "I'm really proud of you. You do know that only healthy people go to counselors, right?"
Dang. Wow.
Which was a real paradigm shift for
Sure.
me,
Yep.
because I'd grown up with only broken people go to
Right.
counselors, or only broken people talk to psychologists or
Mhm.
psychiatrists, and that was the stigma, and that's still around,
It
depending on
is.
what generation, right?
Right.
That's one of the things I admire about the millennials and younger.
Mhm.
Seem to be very open to this idea,
Very largely. Mhm.
and so bravo to them,
Yes.
for shooting down that stigma.
Oh, yeah.
But it has been very healthy. We did walk that road, for a short while with that counselor. Disengaged during COVID, or in COVID,
Mm.
and then re-engaged with another counselor a year or so later for a short period. Again, very healthy, and it was so healthy that we were telling our newly married kids, like, we'll pay for you guys to go, to a few sessions, because we know, you picked up some junk from us for sure,
Right, right,
whether your
right.
spouse did or didn't.
You're gonna need it.
You're going to need this, and the sooner you get on top of this, the better your life's going to be.
Right.
But as are you seeing that out in the marketplace? I mean, you're mostly working with business owners. You said
Mhm.
you do work with some nonprofits, but
Mhm.
uh, uh, how are companies opening up to this idea or embracing this idea? What are some practical? If somebody's listening to the podcast
Mm.
today, this is called a leader's journey. Hopefully, some leaders are listening in.
Mm.
What are some of the things they need to wrestle with? Consider, if you got stats, I love stats, so
Okay.
you can always share
Right,
stats
right.
on this podcast.
Okay, great. Well, when we talk about looking at, okay, so if I'm a leader and I'm either running a company or maybe I'm running a division in a company and we're all human beings, so we're a human being. And when we look at like a diagram of a human being, you have a human being, and then there's these circles that all encase up what makes up a human being. And so, one of the things that many leaders, and this could be a leader of a family, it doesn't have to necessarily be a leader of a company, but it could be leader in a nonprofit or a house of worship or wherever, is looking at, okay, so I am caring for this. I am stewarding a relationship. I'm stewarding people. There might be an end goal because we're producing a product or we're whatever it might be. We're just looking for healthy relationships. But how am I relating? How are we connecting? And how does this individual, what makes them feel and come alive as a human being? A lot of people, it might be, I'm really big into physical activity. I have to be doing something where I'm running or I'm biking. And so if my company offers something for me as an outlet, maybe it's a club, maybe it's uh, a, a service project where I can ride my bike and raise money for a nonprofit in town, whatever the case may be. That's one area of a human being. Another area would be the social aspect. Some human beings must be social. So what does that look like in maybe a workplace setting? How are we creating that atmosphere for our employee to find that connection at work and recognize where is the place that they can be social, especially if we're talking about an office complex where everyone's in a cubicle? How do we foster and facilitate social activity to encourage health in the workplace? We're talking that's of course in the workplace,
Mhm.
but then there's other areas of a human being, and we can go into all psychology world with that. But the biggest part is that there is also a spiritual side to a human being, and even in psychology, they will say, well, a human being can engage with that spiritual side or not. And so recognizing there is a human being, but there's something that makes them whole. And what makes a whole human being? And then how am I as a leader looking at those individual human beings, which we don't have time exhaustive to fully dissect a human being, but we can recognize those areas that how do we connect?
Mm.
And so when we talk about the connectedness at work specifically, or even connectedness in families, statistics are off the charts where people feel disconnected from their families. maybe their job situation, they don't feel connected. Nobody wants to hear their story or connect with them. And then what makes them feel connected? And so, how do we be proactive in these areas? And many companies have done so many neat ideas. I mean, there's these creative ideas out there, specifically in a company where they're doing what we call mental health days and just giving people permission. This is powerful, giving another human being permission to take time to focus on themselves. Of course, you'll have people who might abuse the freedom, but for the most part, people are like, wow, I feel you care about even my inner health
Mm.
and what's going on, and I need a break from something. Other companies are doing just fun things to create social activities for employees to feel like, hey, we believe in the causes you believe in. So rallying around something that does something for good in the community. There's just so many different ways to connect. But I think that is when we talk about what we're seeing with this whole human being and a human being, what makes up their mental health is everything from stress, how they make decisions, what they think or feel. I mean, there's so much that encompasses managing mental health, but how do we be proactive? And so that's where a lot of leaders are looking at assessing the benefits that they have in their companies, or what are we doing as a family, or what are we doing in our unit to meet this and being strategic about it.
Do you have any, if you have any stories along the way, feel free to share those, by the way. Um, as leaders are looking to do something different, you gave a great example of kind of these social opportunities, the give back to the community opportunities. Do you have any other examples like that, or even more specific in those thoughts that you can share?
So one of the things that we've been seeing more and more is internally within companies specifically, they are structuring a fund so where other coworkers or individuals can give to this fund, but it goes towards the needs of each other. And so a way to give back to their fellow coworker, but it's all for emergency funds if a family runs into a situation where they have a car accident and they're needing a vehicle, or whatever the case may be, or unfortunately a health diagnosis that leaves that employee stuck and needing some extra support. They can pull from what the company and the employees have said, I want to support my fellow coworker. And how powerful is that? Where everyone feels like an ownership in that and like, wow, we're giving back to our own and we have access as well. Other ways are, and you've probably seen this too, where there's just other ways of outlets. Maybe it's a marriage retreat. Maybe there's ways to involve children into the work environment where it's play days or picnics or just creative ways to cultivate community. Many people are looking to connect. And so how is that done, and why would someone intentionally do that when, we got to hit the bottom line, have production for our company, but we recognize that we want them to thrive and flourish. And so how are we doing that intentionally in our atmosphere?
In the late 80s, when I first got out of college, our company did like a family day, and where the whole idea was, it was like a Saturday morning or something, but you could bring your families in and tour them through, and we happen to be in the manufacturing sector, clean, high tech. And so it's kind of, interesting stuff. But the families could go on tour and just kind of walk around, and there'd be snacks in the break room. And I remember that was just a simple thing, but there was so many families that were just, the kids were like, oh, this is better than a field trip. I get to see where mom and dad work.
This is a great idea. It's kind of like in the school system when you have a show and tell and you're bringing something, or you're having your parent come in and talk about what they do for a profession. But in the workforce, because the more we get to know what people are connected to and what their passions are, the deeper we can connect. And then they feel heard and known. And so that is powerful. I actually have not run across too many companies. I've heard where they've brought their child, to work day. So then the kid is there shadow day. But how powerful for our coworkers to meet our family or our significant others who never come to usually the job site, but get a chance to like, oh, wow, this is more about who you are and what makes you you, not just what you do here. That's powerful.
I remember one of my younger cousins happened to be in town, and I was like, you want to go to this? Sure.
Nice.
So I'm walking her through, and people are like, who's this? They're like, my cousin.
My cousin. Yeah, that's super fun.
So that was just kind of a fun moment. One of my clients, they do Santa for the kids
Mm,
every year during the holidays,
okay.
and so rather than have to go sit at the mall
Hmm.
and for hours to get a picture with Santa, they arrange it all there at the company. And again, I think it's a Saturday morning, and they
That's
have
great.
donuts and hot chocolate and whatever,
Yeah.
and so it's an opportunity. Families come around and meet each other's kids
Yeah.
and just do something, and you don't have to pay for it, right?
Right.
Like you do at those are getting kind of pricey at the mall
Well, that's
these days,
great.
So,
Very good.
but that I hadn't thought about either one of those events until you
Hmm.
shared what you shared.
That's neat.
Um, but let's say you're a leader. Listen to the podcast. This idea of, hey, I'm hearing all this mental health stuff. The stats are bad,
Hmm.
but we've never talked about it in our company.
Mm,
Never, whether it's a company of 5 or a company of 500,
yeah.
we've never really talked about it. What do they need to wrestle with? I guess is the
Hmm.
first question. Then we'll go from there. What,
Yeah.
what does that leader need to be thinking about processing?
I think one of the big things that, and I'm no expert in all of this, but I would imagine understanding your own culture. So, your own culture of your company. More and more there has been a lot of acquisitions happening. And so, in the midst of acquisitions, there is this volatile culture and they're trying to put new initiatives. And so, what are the initiatives? What are the things, or what has been longstanding if it's a family generation or multi generational company? What is some of the cultural things that are key, and what are the current programs that are provided for the benefit or health of your people? I think that's one of the best places to start, and just assessing that and saying, are we meeting this? What are our initiatives, and then how are we meeting that? And almost like doing a pulse check on what's happening. And then from there, it's really identifying, okay, we're missing this one area. There's an area we're missing, and what is it? And if it is something about extended care or connection to care, then okay, what are the next steps after that? And recognizing that every company is going to be a little bit different. Every culture of a company is a little bit different. But if there's already a culture of care that's already there, or if it's an initiative of the team to switch to more of a culture of care, then definitely there's some steps that the leadership has to represent starting off. So, we know this, like, it's very difficult to change the culture of a company if the leadership is not exemplifying that same value system and initiatives and leading by example. And I've been in many companies who want to have, again, going back to a Band-Aid approach, they just want to have a do good, kind of like check my mark, do good, and put a care program like what I represent into their company. And it's a disaster because it's not aligning with the values or even the culture of care within a company. And so looking at and it's a long-term initiative because it's never something that's short-term,
Mm,
especially when we're talking about how are we proactively putting something in to care for the whole human being.
mm.
There's a lot that goes into that. And it takes some time to decide what's the best fit.
Is it been your experience? So there's a lot of great-hearted leaders out there
Yeah.
that just got into business, doing business, and they're fighting every day to keep the business going. And if one of their people needs, new tires or something, I've seen them take money out of their own
Oh,
pocket,
yeah.
So definitely great-hearted people, but they don't have like anything official in place.
Yeah.
Like there's no community outreach program, there's no employee give back program, there's
Hmm.
no benevolence pool, as you described
Hmm.
earlier, where the employees or the company or both are contributing to this uh, care fund. Um, there's just nothing because they've been so busy doing business.
Right.
Um, is there like a best place to start? Is it better to start with their employees or go into the community first, or
Mm.
is it better to help the employees get their AC fixed, or to have chaplains, or like
Right.
is there a proper sequence in your experience, or
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was traveling and meeting with a logistics company, an owner, and he sat down and he shared with me, he's like, I love my people. And just exactly what you shared, he has this amazing heart, almost like a shepherd heart. And when someone's going through a divorce, he'll pay for their counseling and pay for the lawyer. And he just has this heart to just give to his people. And he said, same thing, running his business. He started off with one warehouse. And he goes, I knew all my employees by name. I knew them. I knew their stories. And he's just very intentional. And he goes, we've grown so much. I have now 7 facilities across the city. We got together for a big company picnic, and I had to lean to my HR and say, who's that? Who's that? Who's that? And he felt so disconnected to his people, and he didn't like that feeling. But then he recognized as his company was growing, he could no longer do those one-offs like paying for somebody's lawyer's fees or just all the different things that he was out of the generosity of his own pocket doing for his people, and recognized there was some kind of a boundary that he had to put in place. And so that's where the first thing that I would think about is with his situation, he was in an advisory committee firm and a group that helped him to make some very strategic decisions, similar to what you represent with a C12. And so for him, that was what helped him to make some of the hard decisions when he had to say no, when usually he would say yes. And then when he recognized, whoa, my capacity to know the name and the story of all my employees is impossible. I need help. And so in his situation, his next step was finding a care program that would connect to his people so they knew that each one, they were important, even if he wasn't there to tell them that they were important, that there was, he engaged with having chaplains to visit all of his sites, to engage with all of his people. So that was his first step, or probably his second step in the next steps. I'm sure he had other things he had to curb because of the growing business. And one day just recognizing his head's down, doing what he does, and recognizing, whoa, lots changed. I need help. And finding the advisory to help him make next steps, and then the right solutions to keep that same culture of care.
I'm glad you shared that story, because I've actually run into some well-intentioned leaders that huge hearts.
Yeah.
And then they look at the world around them and go, you know what? We need to go dig wells in Africa, and or we need to, help this build schools in South America, or something, that's important.
Yes.
Desperately needed.
Right.
But then around the time I came along, their employees are like, yeah, but what about me?
Isn't that
Great that you're doing
something?
something over there. Hard to argue with, right?
Right.
And then as an employee, you feel guilty. Why am I having those thoughts? Like,
Oh, wow.
my boss cares more about these people in the third world country than he does about me. But I feel
real.
terrible thinking about that, because those people in the third world country need it.
Need it.
They need water.
Yep.
And so there's this internal conflict with the employee. Like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. But at the same time, it's, true.
Right.
I feel this way.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you shared that story, that the first place that guy goes is, how do I care for my employees better?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, and great organizations, but we rush out to say, hey, Saturday, let's all meet and build a house for a homeless person.
Right.
Great cause.
Good causes. Yes.
Great cause. Have you run into that at all as you're out in the marketplace? Like, where sometimes the leader goes for the hey, let's do the Saturday thing. Let's go to the soup kitchen on Friday afternoon.
Yeah.
But doesn't have anything internally for the employees.
Oh, yeah. There is, and that's going back to this emotionally healthy leader, going back to taking time as a leader to know our blind spots, and be the best we can be, because we're always growing and changing. No one's ever arrived, but maintaining that emotional health. So that way, when we're looking at our people and fostering for them to have emotional health, but also thrive in the jobs, there is exactly this where I'll never forget that. And there is a business owner that I met. And again, he'd been connected to an advisory group that helped him to see something he wasn't seeing as a blind spot. He did the same thing. He had these amazing initiatives that were passions of his heart, doing good work outside of his own city. So it was across the world. And through actually recognizing, wow, it's not just about what I think is a good cause. I never have ever, somebody had posed a question to him, well, what do your people want to do? So he actually went back to his people, and he kind of did this assessment of laying down what he thinks they would want to be a part of. and said, "Hey, share." I don't know if I think he was something where he did like a pooling of just, "Hey, what are some initiatives that you all give in your free time, or you loved some things in the city that you love to give to or support?"
Mm.
And he was shocked that it had nothing to do with what they were doing overseas and these big things. It was actually just simple local little charities that some people were really championing and were passionate about. But when he sought to connect to what his people cared about, it shifted him. And he said, I no longer started to be the initiative of things. Yes, I still can give. My wife and I can still give and be a part of bigger initiatives that we're passionate about. But when it comes to my company, hearing from my people, and then they began to create, I think it was like pools of funds, and then have champions of their employees who would champion a cause, rally around their coworkers. It brought connectedness together. Then they can go in the community and do things that they are passionate about. And so he shifted his whole perspective on what's the heart cry of my people, not so much what is my heart cry as a business leader. And that's not everyone's going to do that. I mean, that takes some real inner searching, and then being accountable to another, to someone to ask the hard questions to figure out, oh, am I just doing this? Oh, why am I doing this? And how do my people really feel about this? So yeah, I mean, there's people who will never change. They don't want to change. This is my initiatives, and if you work here, this is what we give to you, and that's how it is. But there is something powerful about turning it to the people, especially if our desire is to bring them in and connect them to a bigger picture of our organization. And every site's going to be different, every company's going to be different. But how powerful is that? Like if I was an employee in his company and he said, "Hey, what's on your heart? What are you passionate about? And I want to come alongside you and give you a voice in our company to share that message."
It, as you shared that, I recall just recently one of my clients, just the leadership team's like, "Hey, we've been given to this cause. We've been in this fundraiser, really great organization, but are they the right one?"
Ah,
And they couldn't figure out why they were thinking that.
yeah.
So as they allowed themselves to entertain the idea, what they found, and it was a cool long story over many months, but they just recently announced their official new direction. They found, and I've never seen this before anywhere else, but an unusually large number of their staff had adopted children.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden they're like,
Oh,
I mean, like, it feels like over 50% of their staff is
oh
adopted
man.
kids.
Oh man.
Like, it's a really unusually large number. And they're like, our heart's for adopted kids.
Hmm.
How about we do our fundraiser for that?
Whoa.
It's taking it to a whole nother
Different
level.
Oh yeah.
Because to your point, the leadership team said, hey, what we've been doing is great. And we all believe in that
Of
cause.
course.
But it feels like there's something different, right?
Kudos for them to take the time to just pause, because not everyone's willing to do that. But how powerful is those pauses in
Well, like the
business?
leader you're talking about,
Yep.
it changed his whole life
Oh
experience.
yeah.
It went from, hey, this was just something I thought we were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what my wife and I believe in,
Right.
to this is what my employees want to do.
Yeah.
Like the whole time, I can just imagine, putting myself back as the employee early on, out of college, when the bosses involved me in stuff. It was a whole different world.
You have a sense of ownership,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a connectivity that goes deeper than just I work here. There's something more.
Mm-hmm. When I consulted out at Rackspace years ago, they had a neat program that they would give you X days, and it was a large allotment that you could go volunteer in the nonprofit of your choice.
Uh-huh.
And so the employees got to decide where they were going to invest
Very
their
nice.
time. And so that was kind of cool too, because then it became a very personal, like everybody in the company, 7,000 employees, whatever they had, gets 5 days a week. You get to give away 5 days a year. You get to give away
That's great.
to a nonprofit of your choice. Go volunteer in a soup kitchen if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Go build a house if that's what you want to do. Go to a mission trip and
See.
some overseas if that's what you want to do. Those 5 days are yours.
Yeah, I worked for a bank back in the day that was similar. And it was so great because we represented so much of our community within our workforce because we were given that freedom and we were championed. And one of the things, and this is some best practices that maybe it's good to relook at them, because one of the things was celebrating that. So I know this sounds a little crazy, but this bank I worked for would give you pins and celebrate your volunteerism in the community and just all these things that you did to contribute. And I don't know that we celebrate sometimes that, not that we want to focus and give, pedestals or things like this,
Mhm.
but there's something about saying thank you
Mhm.
and how powerful a thank you is, or even a public recognition, and how far that can go as well
Mm.
in connecting.
Glad you shared that.
Mm,
In fact, as you said that, I was like, I could encourage some of my CEOs with that.
there we go.
'Cause
Yeah.
we usually don't do a good job celebrating. We do an
Right.
okay job sometimes, but
Yeah.
we rarely do a great job.
I'll tell you, and everyone's so different, and learning what makes people tick is part of human relations, and especially managing people. But some people, as we know, just need a thank you and a look in the eye.
Mhm.
Some people need a written note. But a lot of people, it's powerful to praise in front of others,
Mhm.
and it doesn't cost any money to do that
Mhm.
without any manipulation. I mean, it's
Yeah,
obviously pure,
genuine.
but
Yeah,
powerful, very powerful.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
If you're again, if somebody's listening to the podcast and they're what would kind of what's the easiest, lowest barrier of entry, lowest cost way to engage that
Mm.
you've seen?
The first thing that comes to mind is, as a leader or even as just as a human being, what's the difference between empathy and sympathy? And we tend to think, oh, they're very similar. But when we talk about empathy being the ideal route to go in the first step, it is actually being thoughtful ahead of time, or using thought with an approach to connect. And so, Brene Brown, who is the research professor down in University of Houston, she has these little video things you can watch, and one of the things is it's they're characters. There's like I want to call it a teddy bear, but it's not a teddy bear. It's a fox and a bear, and the fox is at the bottom of the hole underground, crying, where the bear's at the top of the ground, and there's a ladder. And she gives this example of what is sympathy? The sympathy is the bear saying, "Come on out of the hole, fox. Come on. There's the ladder. I'm here. I'm going to reach down and grab you." Whereas empathy is the bear going down the ladder, sitting next to the fox, and just crying with the fox.
Mm-hmm.
Who does that? Who wants to do that?
Mm-hmm.
But how powerful is that connection?
Mm.
So that doesn't cost anything. It can take some time. But when we think about the first step in building a connection with another human being, or with our coworkers, or with people that we are managing, we have to, of course, have boundaries in some of these
Mhm.
things. But when we lean towards an empathy approach, it's learning to hear someone's story, or it's seeking to understand another. And the power of that first connection, or just being sensitive to the moment, can open doors for other things to happen.
Mm.
So there's really no cost to that. It's just, I think a lot of it is probably more time and being aware of the situation and the environment, and empowering our people to be the same way.
So almost all the leaders I know just turn the podcast off.
Sorry.
just the way I grew up, right?
Right.
Engineer, scientist,
Yeah, yeah, sorry.
geeks,
Yes.
yeah, manufacturing,
Got it.
not touchy-feely kind of guys
Okay,
and
okay.
gals. But
Yeah.
no, and I bring that up for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, I get your point,
Yeah.
right? But one of the things that leaders do is like, man, I'm already spending 80-hour weeks. How do I have more time to climb down the ladder and sit in the hole and cry with the person?
And maybe it's not that we're doing that. Maybe we have others around us that we bring in to be reinforcements and
Yeah.
support agents that have the capacity, or that we've empowered to do that. So we all know our limits. We all know our boundaries. We all know what we can do and we can't do. And we all know what's on our plate. And this is where you come to that head of even leaders who say, I still love people, but I am spent. I cannot give anymore, and I can't empathize with this. Where do I turn? What do I do? And that's where it's finding the best fit and a solution, especially in a company specifically, of how does that reach multiply beyond me
Mhm.
and my heart? Because it's my heart that I can only do so much.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Mm.
And we talk about that all the time in leadership, like build to your weaknesses, right?
Oh, interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you're not naturally empathetic, or
Mhm.
you don't feel like you have time to be empathetic,
Right. And it's real.
build,
There's nothing wrong with that.
build
Yes.
to that weakness.
Mm-hmm.
And as a friend of mine likes to say, shore that up.
Ooh, okay, there you go.
Um, the you recent congratulations, by the way, on recently completing your PhD.
Thank you.
Anything as you were doing that research that would be valuable for leaders to know?
Mm, yeah. The first thing probably is whenever we submit ourselves to a process and maybe even a learning journey, we know it transforms us.
Hmm.
And for myself, recognizing the areas that I need to grow in was part of that higher education journey for me. When I My research was tied around my organization, which is a care organization, and some of our efficiencies and effectiveness,
Hmm.
and really doing a self-analysis on how are we really doing. And one of the biggest things when I presented back to my organization of the findings and some recommendations as the researcher, couldn't put my bias in there, but here's what I found and here's my recommendations, was listen to your people.
Hmm.
Your people have so much wisdom and insight. And I think many times we don't always turn to our people. We'll turn to an expert outside of our organization or our leadership team or our board and thinking, oh, we got all the answers. But it's very powerful to listen to our people on the front lines because many times they shed light on the blind spots that we as an organization are like, oh, that was really simple. But if we would have just taken the time to listen to our people,
Hmm.
maybe it would have helped us to see from a different perspective,
Hmm.
or we would have gained a new way to teach something or to provide an efficiency that we would have never seen.
Hmm.
So there's a lot, from, of course, my journey, but that's something that I would say from the findings, I was shocked by the wisdom that came out of just taking time to interview our own people
Hmm.
and hear from their perspective.
I actually saw that. I've seen that quite a bit over the years, is when leaders do slow down and involve the people, which
Mhm.
involves, to truly involve them, you have to listen to them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. There is a manufacturing firm up in northern Oklahoma that I got a chance to tour. And they work with oil and they bend big things of steel. And it's super clean. The floor is clean. It's all organized. And I turned to the leader. I was like, I don't see this very often. Tell me the story. Well, he began to share his own leadership journey of learning some hard lessons and then turning to his people to ask insight into how could we make your area more efficient, whatever the case may be. And one of his operators that was working on the manufacturing floor had a solution. And because of his solution, that kept the floor clean.
Hmm.
It was incredible. No oil on the floor. It was just incredible just because he listened to his people. Of course, he took initiative to take time.
Hmm.
They know their world, they know their station, and they have some ideas that what if we implement what, and it just made a difference. And of course, can you imagine the employee who helped
Hmm.
be part of keeping a clean workspace and the floor's clean, and how proud that employee would feel.
Hmm. Yeah, I can't imagine. I was blessed to my early career, first out real job. I was at a company that was intentionally trying to listen to the employees,
Wow,
and it's still some of the fondest time in my life
powerful.
because I felt like they were listening, they were taking our ideas, we were implementing, and I say we
Mm,
because we created a team culture.
there you go.
So where literally the business was being run by the teams,
Yeah.
because that we had been empowered to make a difference. And,
Mm,
and we had a process we had to go through, and did it make sense? And could it
mm,
contribute to the bottom line? And or was it faster? Was it smarter?
mm.
Was it safer?
Sure.
No oil on the floor,
Right.
right? So that might have actually taken more time
Oh yeah.
to get the oil off the floor. But the fact that now they had something that is rare in their
Mhm.
industry
Mhm.
actually contributed to the pride of ownership.
Oh, definitely. Yep. I remember when I started, I used to work for the Nordstrom company, and I started with them in the Northwest. And as a brand new employee with them, one of the biggest things that they told us in our training was, you now represent Nordstrom wherever you go. So you think about that in the back of your mind. Wherever you go, you're representing Nordstrom. But another side of that, they would say, and our training was, you are now the owner in your department. You own that business. act as an owner. And I mean, you're a salesperson. You start as a salesperson. It's like, what? What? Okay. But the ownership that they told you, like you have you have the right to make the right decision so the customer is satisfied. How empowering was that? And my career with them, as I moved into management and did other things in that organization, it was incredible, the sense of ownership that all of us had, because there was a promotion from within, but then you were empowered to take care of things. You didn't need to call a manager or a supervisor. You had the power to make the situation solved.
Mhm.
And I carried that all through my career in the different places I've been, because that culture of caring and being empowered, I know how I thrived in that, and I saw others around me thrive in that, and it's rare to find. But if we can help to cultivate that, how powerful, and just imagine the workforce.
Mm-hmm. You're out in the marketplace. We're post-COVID. Some more scares with the current COVID wave happening. Do we go back into lockdown or shelter in place? What hopes do you have for what you're seeing out there? And we've talked about some of the struggles that are there and that are real.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the good things you're seeing?
Yeah. There is intentionality in connecting. There is such a desire for connecting with others. And what I mean by that is not that we didn't have that before, but people are recognizing, I can relate to you because you've had the same loss as me.
Mm.
I can relate to you because you're on mental health maybe you're on medication, like I'm on medication.
Mm.
I can relate to you because you're sick and I'm sick. You're working from home and I'm working from home. There's just so much more openness to connect, and then there's more intentionality to connect.
Mm.
And that is what we need as a society. Unfortunately, there's been so much isolation.
Mm.
And so there is more of this, no, I don't want to be alone. And I also want to open up about what I'm struggling with another. I mean, even in houses of worship, people don't do that, but it's happening, and people are wanting to share their struggles and be open about it so they can get help. And that's the best way to get help, is get it out in the open. And so I would say that there is more intentionality with connection, and not just this whole empathy, sympathy thing, but more of, hey, someone hearing my story and someone wanting to walk with me through life, and where can I find that? So people are searching for safe places and wanting to be a safe place for another.
Mm-hmm. That does sound good.
Yeah, it's encouraging.
Yeah. Any thoughts you have for future leaders?
I will say the more I learn, the more I grow, the more people I meet, the more I recognize how I need to spend time on myself. So for future leaders, and even for people aiming for wanting to have influence, how important it is to take time to focus on ourselves and to never stop. It's just so important to do those pause moments. And maybe it's just going out in nature and just having a breath of fresh air and getting a fresh perspective, or just separating from a cell phone for half of a day. These things are so healthy, just as being a human being, but especially in aspiring to lead others. It's so easy for us to step into leadership and places of influence and just keep going instead of aligning with another to find a blind spot or having accountability. It's just powerful as we continue on in our leadership journey.
Mm-hmm. That's very good. Any final thoughts you want to share?
Well, I am so thankful to be able to connect and just talk and share. And I appreciate the opportunity. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have you back sometime.
All right. Sounds
It's a
good.
pleasure.
Thank you.